Today I will show you how I built this truly insane Game Boy Color. It not only features a new AMOLED touch display, it also has an USB-C mod, DIY resin cast buttons with a backlight, I made a custom cartridge for it, and the star of the show, it can be wirelessly charged in this awesome stand I designed and 3D printed. In this video, you watch me go from this standard off-the-shelf Game Boy, which was kindly donated to me by a good friend, and we turned it into this beauty you wish you had as a kid. And also, I will show you how you can build one too. I am Paul, and this is my little mod shop. Let's do this. Alright, so as I mentioned before, this is a standard off-the-shelf Game Boy Color I was gifted by a friend of mine. What he doesn't know is that he will get this Game Boy back soon, with a few but significant upgrades of course. So the plan I have is to build a really high-end Game Boy that will not only look gorgeous, but also has some nice quality of life upgrades to get it back to the future, which is right now I guess. I went through a few iterations how this Game Boy could look like, but settled with one of those new duo colored shells by Extreme Raid, which just look awesome. They also come in a green-blue color scheme, which I will definitely use for a future build. For the electronic components I need for this project, I took a deep dive on AliExpress, where I found these AMOLED touch displays. They not only give richer colors because of the deeper black level, you can also reach the menu and navigate through it with the touch of a finger. This definitely blew my mind the first time I saw it. Now, for power, I had a few different ideas. First, I thought about one of those LiPo USB-C kits I also used in my Game Boy Advance build. I also found another alternative by Alberto Giltessa. He does a lot of cool USB-C mods, which I'm very curious to try out. In fact, I already bought one of these Game Boy Color USB-C mods and was ready to put it into this build. But then I found another option. This USB-C mod also utilizes a daughter board to enable wireless charging on the Game Boy Color. And although I like Alberto's placement of the USB-C port better, I can't resist such a flashy feature in my build. Remember, this should be a high-end, balls-to-the-wall Game Boy Color. And with that, I can't simply let it have normal buttons too. Nope, I will get custom-made resin buttons I will cast myself. And that's still not enough. I also have one of those backlight kits from Retro 6 from a few years ago. This will make them shine, but more on that a little later. In the meantime, all the necessary components for the build have arrived and we can start disassembling the Game Boy. For all the mods you will need a tri-wing and a Phillips head screwdriver, maybe flush cutters, or at least a crafting knife and a soldering iron. Now let's start with getting the donor console apart. In total there are 6 tri-wing screws in the back of the Game Boy, 4 on top and 2 hiding in the battery compartment. And after removing the back, there are 3 more in the way. This time they are Phillips head screws. Before we can lift the PCB out, we need to detach the screen ribbon cable, and we also remove the power switch and the infrared cap. Now the PCB is free to go and I give it a quick rub with IPA. I want it to be squeaky clean and free from old debris for the next steps. Now for the button membranes, I really don't like aftermarket ones that much, as they are most of the time stiff and squeaky. These here are okayish, I would say, but I do need them as they are transparent and therefore pass the most light to the buttons. If some of you can recommend good button membranes, please let me know. This time I will leave the front end of the shell intact and won't remove the LCD. It is also in mint condition and will get reused in another Game Boy in the future. Next, I will prepare the PCB to get the backlight kit in. For this, I need to remove the battery status LED. This is where the soldering iron comes in. I set the heat around 330°C and then touch both legs of the LED at the same time. This lets the LED just fall out. Now the backlight kit will sit flush with the PCB and needs to be soldered on the board at all those contacts. There are some points on the flex PCB that are not really necessary to solder down at this point, however, it will give good contact and keeps it flush. I pre-tin all of those contacts before going in and solder them in place. This is for good practice and make sure there are no cold joints because of the fresh solder introduced to the board. And this is how it should look like when we are done with the board. But there's still one thing missing on this board. You see, my guy is a musician and this is his logo. So I 3D printed it in a few different sizes as I wasn't sure what would look best, and then put it over the Retro 6 logo. Nice. Okay, with the PCB now out of the way, we can move on to the buttons. And as I mentioned before, I will cast them myself. And to cast them, we need a mold. And the mold we will make for them is a so-called 2-part mold. Means there are a few steps involved with that, so let's get right into it. First, I will use the buttons from the Extreme Ray kit, as they are new and don't have any signs of wear on them. This is so important, as I will make an exact copy of the buttons, and if there's a scratch on any part, it will be in the cast button too. Here you see me fill the buttons with oil-based clay. This is important because I want to use as much resin as possible on the buttons, otherwise they will be hollow like the originals. Some time ago I made myself a 3D printed mold box, which also has an registration. That's the round corner right here, so you can't put the mold together the wrong way. I use a dab of glue stick just to hold the buttons in place, and when everything looks good and every button has enough space around it, then we can start the casting process. I use Smooth-On's Moldstar 31T for this cast, as that's all I have laying around. And after measuring, mixing, degassing and pouring the first half, I take a prolonged coffee break with the boys, and after around 40 minutes it is time for part 2. The silicone has now fully hardened out, and with that I freed from the mold box. Now I need to carefully get the clay platforms out of the mold. I clean up some edges with a crafting knife, and then comes the fun part, sticking toothpicks into the buttons, or better, in the clay to be more exact. I need to make sure that all the buttons have two sticking out, as these are the vents for the resin to flow in and out of. The start and select buttons are really hard to get right, but also not impossible. I just put them right in those handy holes and trim them flush when the resin buttons are done. And as for the D-pad, I actually use a cutoff from a cotton swab, as it is a little bit thicker and therefore make sure all the resin will flow and stay in. And with every toothpick in place, I put on 2 coats of mold release. This ensures that the two parts of the mold won't stick together. Otherwise, the buttons are sealed into the silicone and I have to start anew. Then I mix up another batch of silicone, degas it, pour it, and after another 40 minutes or so, it is finally done. Let's see if everything worked out. After pulling all the toothpicks and getting the mold apart, I removed the buttons and ta-da! This is how you make a resin mold, kids. Again, there is some cleanup to do, but nothing a little IPA and a cotton swab can handle. And after that I give everything another quick spray of mold release and put them aside for now. Finally, button time. I chose to work with Smooth-On's Crystal Clear series, as it is a quick cast resin and has a good hardness level. Please be aware, the fumes of the resin are super toxic, so please take appropriate steps to prevent getting harmed. I use a mask and handle this stuff only with an open window. And also, don't forget to wash hands. Now for the style of the buttons, I thought of making them with little galaxies inside them. Means I want to have a clear top, some swirl in the middle and a black background. This is achieved in 2 parts and some good timing. By looking at the can of the crystal clear resin, we can see that it has a pot life of around 9 minutes, which means when the 2 parts are getting mixed together, I have around 9 minutes to fully mix, degas and pour them. But there's another step involved which makes the whole thing a little bit more stressful. You see, to get the swirls in the middle of the clear resin, I need to first pour it and then wait for the clock to hit the 8 to 9 minute mark, as this is where the resin slowly starts to set and getting thicker. And there is a tight window of like 2 minutes I can swirl in my little galaxies to make them perfect. The resin should have a consistency of something like caramel, or a bit harder than that even. Because if I get the blue mica powder in too early, I risk the powder to sink too fast and mix in with the rest of the clear top. Too late and I just make a dent in the top part of the button and the powder won't mix in, right? So that is, for me at least, the most stressful part about the whole casting process. And after that I need to wait for around 20 minutes or so to pour the rest of the button. So I put on the top of the silicone mold, mix up another batch of resin with a few drops of black dye and inject it in the vents. When everything is filled up, it goes right into my DIY pressure pot. I have set it for around 40 psi. This makes sure all the bubbles get crushed and showing nice and clean buttons. As I have to wait another 4 to 5 hours before I can finally see the finished buttons, we move on to other things on our list. We are halfway through, so let's push forward. The 2 things we can do right now is getting the AMOLED display installed into the shell, but what I want to start with is this USB-C wireless charging kit here. As I mentioned before, I really think that this feature will put this Game Boy Color on the next level. And for that, I want to design a stand. Not only for display, it should look sleek and function as a charging station too. For that, I bought one of those round wireless chargers for an iPhone. I bought this one specifically because it is black and has no logo on the front, giving the finished piece a really clean and modern look. To actually do the design work for the whole part, I use a program called Plasticity. It's a 3D CAD software that rivals the likes of Fusion 360, Onshape, and so on. It runs locally, has super fair pricing, and there are no hidden costs or stupid subscriptions you need to buy, looking at you, Autodesk. It took some time to get the cutout for the Game Boy just as I wanted, and for alignment with the wireless charger, I took some careful measurements with my calipers. The stand is designed to have the wireless charger friction fitted. This helps with alignment, nothing can fall out, and if the charging pad fails at some point in the future, you still can change it out. Now, printing the part out took around 2 hours with my Cobra S1 combo, and for the filament I used Overture Super PLA Plus in black. I chose this filament because it is a bit more durable than normal PLA and will hopefully survive some falls on the floor. And that's how the finished part looks like. Let's quickly put the wireless charger in and test if the alignment with the battery mod is correct. And it seems to work. Nice. Okay, so now comes the last messy part we have to do. You see, the AMOLED screen here has the screen lens already attached to it, which is great because I don't have to worry about alignment in a finished Game Boy. But that also means I do have some trimming to do, as otherwise there is no way I get the screen into the shell. To not mess up the shell, I use some masking tape around the screen area, because we don't want any scratches in the Game Boy. To see how much I need to cut away from the shell with my X-Acto knife, you can kind of see under a light where the glossy layer was sprayed on and where it ends. And this is exactly where we cut. Again, be careful not to hurt yourself, don't use too much force, and don't take too much of a bite when using something like a flush cutter, as the plastic could easily become fractured and we could risk seeing that in the finished build. This is roughly how it should look when finished. And with a successful test fit, we can get the masking tape off and put the screen in place. Another quick thing we need to do is to get the USB-C cutout on the battery door. The good thing is that the kit came already with a pre-made one, which I can use as a guide. Same thing as before, be careful not to overdo it. It is better to creep up to the final size with a file than to cut or screw it and ruin the port because it's too big now. Alright, we finally have everything on the table to assemble the Game Boy Color. But before we get on with it, let's give a quick shout out to the long-term sponsor of this channel, PCBWay. PCBWay is best known for the top quality PCB manufacturing and assembly, but they do offer so much more, like CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, and injection molding. They also provide a range of 3D printing services, from SLA and FDM to SLM, which is metal 3D printing. But what really makes them stand out for me personally is the customer service. I was a customer long before they sponsored this channel, and they were always there to help, whether it is for answering questions about my order or giving me advice about the best settings to get my parts and PCBs just right. So huge thanks to PCBWay for their continuous support, and you can check the link in the video description down below for more info. And now let's get this awesome Game Boy back together. Okay, so the good thing is we have the screen already in, but I've actually forgotten something that is necessary to make the screen work. This little red wire here. We need to solder this one right here and right here on the main board. Otherwise, the screen won't work at all. I also used some Kapton tape to seal the PCB off the screen, so it won't touch anything that could cause a short circuit in the Game Boy. And now we are done with soldering for good, and we can get a first look at the finished resin buttons I made. With my macro lens, we can also get a really nice close-up on those galaxy swirls. And man, look at them, I'm excited. Okay, so with the demolding, I'm a little careful as I don't want to break anything off. Here I also use a flush trimmer and a crafting knife to get the cleanup done. And with them being free of all the vent spruces and flashing, they go right into the front part of the shell. Then the button membranes come on top. We can finally put the main board back into the Game Boy by just flipping it in like that. The screen ribbon cable can be a little finicky to get in, but make sure both lashes on the side are pressed in fully so the cable is seated correctly and won't come loose over time. Now we can bolt the board down with these 3 Phillips head screws I saved from the original Game Boy. The original screws are most likely to be higher quality than the aftermarket ones, so I'd rather use them to make sure they won't strip. Before we set the front part aside, I also put the infrared cap and the power switch in place. Then we focus on the back side of the shell and getting the cartridge guard screwed in. Another quick tip, don't over tighten any of the screws, because as I mentioned before, we risk getting the shell fractured, and as this is a clear shell, you will see everything. These shells are also not pre-screwed, so you actually put in the thread by the first time you get the screws in. So just be careful. Now I put the back shell in place and put the first 2 tri-ring screws into the battery compartment. Now we can finally get the battery mod in, where it will stay for the rest of its life, and with the lid closed there are only those 4 tri-ring screws left until we are finally finished with the build. Okay, that was a really long process to get where we are right now, but take a look right here. This is the finished, fully decked out Game Boy Color we just built, and I think we need to test it right now, right? So I just grabbed the charging stand, let's plug it in. So yeah, let's give it a go. Does it work? Nothing is happening. Oh, now it works? Oh god. Okay, we have some lights. Okay, how do I do this that you can see? Let's focus on that. Maybe you can see that when it comes on. Okay, I'm so happy. I'm so relieved. Okay, then let's take a look at the Game Boy itself, I guess. 3, 2, 1. Oh boy. It actually turned on. Nice. Oh wow. Yo, those buttons are sick. Boom. Dude, let's go. Okay, now I have the Game Boy and the wireless charger ready to go. Let's meet up with Daniel. Okay, and now I've arrived at my destination and I'm going to meet up with Daniel right now. So let's see how it goes. I've set it up. There it is. Let's see how it goes. I will leave you guys here. Maybe here. Oh shit. Hierher. Gut, ich kann verstehen. Ist besser als im Keller zu sitzen. Okay. Hey! Nice! Funktioniert der? Ja, natürlich funktioniert der. Du kannst den Wireless chargen. Nicht dein Ernst? Hey! Gerne. Ich hab dir auch gefallen, ist ja. Du bist ja aufgenommen. Geil. Nice! Alright, so I would say the surprise was a success, and he definitely haven't seen this coming, right? And after he realized that this is actually his original Game Boy in a fresh new code, we went through all the new features and upgrades it now possesses. Starting with the OLED screen. I must say, I think the new OLED screens are as good as a Game Boy Color screen can get, and I really don't know what possibly can come after this. It is super bright, making it perfect for outdoor use, and through the touchscreen you can enter even more features, like toggle different grid sizes on or off. You can change the color of the Game Boy logo in the front. It is just perfect. Moving down, here you can see the 3D printed inlay and the backlit galaxy buttons I've made. It's a little bright to see on the camera without stepping the lens down, but let me assure you, they look gorgeous too. Now for the star of the show, the battery mod. He didn't realize the first time around that the stand I have made has a wireless charger built in, so I guess this is a win for me, as the design looks kinda modern and sleek, I would say. When putting the Game Boy on the charger, you can see how a little green light starts shining off the battery compartment, meaning the wireless charger is working as intended. I did have the weirdest thing happen with it after showing the feature off like 1 or 2 times, as the wireless charging stopped working after that, but we quickly figured out the issue. It was indeed my design, as the little lip the Game Boy is resting on is a little too far away, making it slip off the sweet spot ever so slightly that it stops charging. However, this is something I can easily fix within the CAD software, and I will get Daniel a new one with a tighter tolerance in the future. Sorry, buddy. In fact, I will let you guys have the charging stand too, for free of course. You can find them on my printables account linked down below. I also added a normal version without the cutout, if you're interested in having the stand just for display use. Oh, and let's not forget about the great custom Game Boy shell I've printed. This one is made by a user named Striller. He did an awesome job with them, and I really love how the design complements the build plate texture of my 3D printer. Such a nice shiny thing. I must say I'm so happy and a bit relieved that Daniel liked the Game Boy design, as I had no idea how he would react to it. But in the end, I do think that with that he finds a new passion for it, and I think he's more likely to pick it up as it is always charged and ready to go for a quick session of Donald Duck Quack Attack or Pokemon Silver Edition. By the way, Gen 2 is the best generation now, we'll die on this hill. So big thanks to Daniel for actually letting me using the footage you guys are seeing right now, and I will link his socials down below. If you're interested in German, bass heavy, alternative pop or something like that, give it a listen. And with that, we are done for this video. So thank you guys for sticking around, and I hope you learned something along the way. And if you want to see how I fully 3D printed a working GameCube console, this next video right here might be for you too.